The last section of chapter 9 is 9.8, and it's called putting a circle in standard form. So just like when we talked about the equation of a line, we had two different forms of it. We had something called slope-intercept form and something called point-slope form. Okay, so you saw this, the standard form of the equation of a circle in the last video, and now we're going to see it in a different form. Okay, so what's going to happen here is when it doesn't come in standard form, we want to put it in standard form. Why? So we can find the center and the radius. That's always our goal when we have a circle. So at the bottom of the screen right now, next to A, the very last thing on the screen, that's an equation of a circle that's not in standard form. So what we're going to talk about today is the steps to put that circle into standard form so that you can find the center and the radius. So first thing that we're going to have to do is something called completing the square. Okay, and you're going to have to do completing the square twice. Now, you learned how to complete the square last year in algebra, and unfortunately, probably for a lot of you, completing the square came once we were already in lockdown. So, I would recommend that you might want to watch this video a few times through. It's more of a process than anything. And again, you're lucky because you're going to be able to look up the steps that you're staring at right now. So if you ever forget how to do it, you can always look back at this video or look back at those steps in order to help you. Okay, so the first step is you're going to put your x's together. So you're going to put your x squared and your x right next to each other. Then you're going to leave a space. And you're going to do the same thing for the y's. You're going to put your y squared and your y's together. And then you're going to leave a space. And then you're going to move your constant term to the other side. Again, your constant term is the number that doesn't have any variable attached to it. Okay, and then step 3 is the completing the square part. Okay, and I wrote take half of the coefficient of x and y and square it and add it to both sides. From last year, you might remember the formula b divided by 2 squared. Okay, it's one and the same thing. And again, I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second. And then we're going to factor. Okay, so here's our goal. We're going to put the circle in standard form. So again, step 1 is going to put your x's together and leave a space, and then put your y's together and leave a space. So here's your x squared, and here's your x. And again, notice I'm taking the signs that are in front of the number. So I'm going to have x squared plus 4x, and then I'm going to leave a space. Okay, and now we're going to do the same thing for the y's. I have a y squared and a negative 10y. So I'm going to have plus y squared minus 10y plus leave a space. Okay, and at the same time here, again, I'm going to do this step 2 where it says move the constant to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 20 from both sides. The 20s will cancel on the left, and on the right, 0 minus 20 is going to be negative 20. Okay, and again, notice that I put plus signs after each term there. Okay, that is going to happen all the time. It is always going to be a positive number. Okay, so step 3 is the completing the squares part. We want to take half the coefficient of x and y and then square it. So what does that mean? Here's the coefficient of x. Again, notice I'm taking the sign that's in front of the number. It's a positive 4. So we're going to take half of 4, which is 2, and then square it. So 2 squared is 4. This 4 that I just underlined represents the completed square, and that's what's going in the space next to the plus sign that's next to my x's. Then we're going to do the same thing for our y's. Okay, we're going to take the coefficient of y, which in this case is a negative 10. We're going to divide that by 2. That's going to give me negative 5. And then we're going to square it. Again, anytime you square a negative number, it's going to become a positive. So negative 5 squared is a positive 25. So we're going to add 25 in that space to the right of the y's. But again, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. That's the whole goal of keeping an equation equal. So right now, on the left-hand side of the equation, I added the 4 and the 25. So I'm going to do the same exact thing on the right-hand side. I'm going to add 4 and I'm going to add 25. Okay, and now step number 4 is going to be to factor. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to factor, we're going to go right down the middle here, and we're going to factor the left-hand side of the squiggly, and then we're going to factor the right-hand side of the squiggly. When you factor these two expressions, they're always going to become what's called a perfect square binomial. So what does that mean? You're going to have one single set of parentheses squared. Okay, what's going inside those parentheses? The first thing is always going to be what times itself gives you the x squared. It's x. And the second thing is always what times itself gives you that last term before the squiggly, which is going to be our 4 here, or what's the square root of 4, and it's 2. Okay, then we need a plus or a minus sign here. How do I know what it's going to be? It's always going to be whatever the sign of that regular old x term is. So again, that was a positive 4, so that's going to be a plus sign. Okay, and then we're going to do the same exact thing on the right-hand side with our y's. Okay, so it's going to become a binomial squared. What's that binomial? First thing again is what times itself gives you that y squared. It's going to be a y. Second thing is what times itself gives you 25, or what's the square root of 25? It's 5. And again, I want the sign of the regular old y term, which is that 10, the negative 10 here. So that's a negative. So that's going to become y minus 5 squared. And on the right-hand side, we'll just add those all together. So if you take negative 20 plus 4 plus 25, you should get an answer of 9. Okay, and now if I just clean this up just a little bit, just so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, now this looks exactly like what you've seen before. There's the equation of your circle in standard form. Okay, so we're going to do 2 more problems. Again, at any point, if you need to rewatch any of this, again, rewind, pause, whatever you need to do. So again, here's our next equation. We have x squared plus y equals 7. So again, my first goal is to put my x's together. Now in this case, unlike the last problem, I only have one x. It's just my x squared. I have no regular x term, which means I don't need to complete the square for that one. Okay, and my y's, they're kind of already together. And again, I'm going to leave a space for whatever I'm going to add there. And unlike the last problem, this constant term is already on the right-hand side, so I don't need to move that. So it's just going to stay on the right-hand side there. So now, again, you do not need to complete the square for the x's. Why? Because there is no regular x term in this equation, but I do need to do it for my y's. So your coefficient of y here is 6. So again, we're going to take half of that coefficient, which is 3, and then we're going to square that. And 3 squared is 9, which means we're going to add 9 here. And again, whatever I do to the left side, I have to do to the right side. So I'm going to add 9 to the right side as well. Next step is to factor. So again, technically we're factoring the x side and the y side. But again, there's nothing that you can factor for x squared, so you're just going to bring down the x squared. And now for the y's, again, this is going to become a binomial squared. First thing that's going in there is what times itself gives you y squared. It's y. Second thing is what times itself is giving you that last term of 9, or again, what's the square root of 9, and it's 3. Again, we need a plus or a minus sign there, and again, we're going to get that from the coefficient of regular old y. Coefficient of regular old y is a positive 6, so that's going to become a plus 3. And then on the right-hand side, 9 plus 7 is 16. So in standard form, that's going to be x squared plus y plus 3 squared equals 16. Okay, and our last one here, we want to find the center and the radius of the circle with the equation x squared plus y squared minus 16x plus 10y plus 88 equals 0. So the problem with this again is that I can't find the center and the radius until that's in standard form. And this is not in standard form. Okay, so again, step number 1 is to put our x terms together and our y terms together. So our x terms, I have an x squared and a minus 16x. So I'm going to have x squared minus 16x. And then again, I'm going to put a plus sign and I'm going to leave a space. For my y's, I have y squared plus 10y. So plus y squared plus 10y. And again, I'm going to put a plus sign and leave a space. Now, unlike the last problem that we just did, this time I do need to get rid of that 88. That constant term, the term with no variable on it, needs to go to the right-hand side of the equation. So to get rid of a positive 88, we're going to subtract 88 from both sides. So the 88s will cancel on the left, and 0 minus 88 on the right is going to give you negative 88. Okay, so now again, we need to complete the square 2 times. Once for our x's, once for the y's. So again, we're taking the coefficient of the regular old x term. The regular old x term here is negative 16x. That coefficient, the number that comes in front, is negative 16. So we're doing negative 16 divided by 2. Negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8. And negative 8 squared is a positive 64. So we're going to put a 64 in that first blank. We need to do the same thing for the y's now. Complete the square for the y. The regular old y term here is a positive 10y. So the coefficient of that y term is a positive 10. And again, we're going to take half of that. We're going to divide it by 2. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. And 5 squared is 25. So 25 is going into that second space. So now again, I've added 64 and 25 to the left-hand side. For this equation to stay equal, that means I need to do the same exact thing on the right-hand side, meaning I need to add 64 and 25 on the right-hand side as well, so I do not change the value of that equation. Again, the next step now is going to be to factor. So we're going to factor this entire left-hand side first of that squiggly. We're going to factor our x's. Again, that is a perfect square trinomial. It is always going to factor into a binomial squared. First thing, what times itself gives you x squared? It's x. Second thing, what times itself gives you 64, or what's the square root of 64? It's 8. And again, we're looking at our regular old x term, and we're looking at that sign that's in front of it. It's a negative 16, which means we're going to have a minus sign between the x and the 8. So the left-hand side of that squiggly is going to factor into x minus 8 squared. Right-hand side, my y's, they're going to factor the same exact way. It's going to factor into a binomial squared. First thing is, what times itself gives you y squared? It's y. Second thing is, what times itself gives you 25, or what's the square root of 25? It's 5. And again, we're taking the sign of whatever that regular old y term is. So it was a positive 10y, which means we're going to put a plus sign there. Okay, and on the right-hand side, again, we're going to actually add negative 88 plus 64 plus 25, and when you do that, you should get an answer of 1. So there's the equation in standard form, and again, now I can tell you what the center and the radius are. So when the equation is in standard form, remember you are pulling off what's attached to x and y with the opposite signs to find the center. So the opposite of a negative 8 is a positive 8. The opposite of a positive 5 is a negative 5. So the center of your circle is 8, negative 5. Again, that right-hand side, the generic form of your equation, that's going to be r squared. So in this case, r squared is 1. The opposite of squaring something is taking the square root. And when you take the square root of 1, it's just going to become 1 again. So the center of that circle is 8, negative 5, and your radius is a positive 1. Again, Please rewatch this video as many times as you need to, again, so that process clicks. Okay, take it slow, make sure you follow the step-by-step rules, and that's it.